because we've talked about so much about kind of the artistic aspect and how that was where I came from as a skater. So this is it's interesting to me, but this is a tangent that I've never really talked about. But so another thing that would happen when all the skaters would get together is we had the half pipe in the backyard. So there'd be rad sessions. We also had P rails that we'd bring out into the street in the front, and people would skate and session on that. And that was rad too. But so I had these weird, idealistic, ideas about skating, like where I thought it was artistic, and I always thought, it was important to be pure and, to have integrity. And so when people would skate on the P rail, I thought that is so lame. I learn on real handrails. I don't practice on, a rail foot off the ground. I go out to, UCLA and I'm skating these real rails where I can get hurt. The stakes are high, that's pure, right? The stakes are real. And then when, foam pits came around, it was the same thing. It's like, I don't learn jumping into a foam pit. I learn on a real launch box, like where I can get hurt. Like the stakes are real. Like I always thought there was like real pride and integrity and kind of that vision of skating.
Yeah.
And similarly,
hardcore.
When, what's that?
Hardcore.
Yeah, exactly.
Hardcore,
right?
yeah.
Punk rock attitude, right?
Yeah.
Like street, right? Do it yourself.
Yeah.
And then, Matt Salerno came around and like, he was actually training, he had like this huge aerobic capacity and he could do these long runs and he could get big air. And like, he was, he would jog in the mornings and he'd go to the gym and all this stuff. And I'm like, who does that? It's like, this isn't a sport. Like I'm an artist. I skate. That's my athletic, output.
Yeah.
And again, this is just a sign of maturity and looking back. But looking back, I feel like I was such an idiot. Like all those things, they may have been idealistic and maybe there was some kind of like punk rock or virtuous attitude, but they were all inhibitors to better skating. And now I think the bottom line is the product. Like you want to do the best skating. And I think, I wish I would have spent more time on P rails. I wish I wouldn't have had such such an arrogant, shitty attitude about P rails. I wish I would have spent more time taking advantage of woodward, like using resi pads and foam pits. It's like, if they can help you be a better skater, then use them. Like I did actually, Aaron Feinberg learned a backflip. I'm like, shit, I really want to learn a backflip. And so we were at Woodward once. I'm like, and I felt so guilty. I'm like, what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to backflip into the foam pit. And so I did. And I did a backflip on the resi pad. I'm like, all right. So I went over to the launch box and I did a backflip and I learned them. And it was easy.
Yeah.
And it was easy because I didn't have to be scared on the launch box. I did it in the foam pit, I did it on the resi, and I did it on the launch box. So I learned backflips. And I always felt kind of shameful. It's like, yeah, I learned it into the foam pit at Woodward. But I shouldn't feel shameful, It's like I should have tried, I should have tried to get harder and harder tricks. And it's like, I really feel like that held my skating back, just having those dumb, like virtuous ideas that are not really, they're purely like intellectual, like abstract, emotional ideas that I don't know, maybe there's some argument you can make for kind of like the idealism.
I was just about to make a good argument for the value of that, because I think that having that perspective, like blading, and this, I'm sure you can agree with that. Like a big part of it is not so much the tricks that are done, but the person that does them, the attitude behind the trick, the delivery, the whole culmination. And a lot of that is, you had a lot of that in your attitude, and that's a huge influence. And some of the people that I look up to the most, or my peers that I really like their skating, like, Brandon Campbell and these guys, they're not so much like, oh, they're the best skaters, but just like I'm a fan of them, who they are as people. And then they just like do skating, which is like, that's cool too. So I think I can relate that to you as well as a few others,
I appreciate that. And you're right. But I guess the takeaway, I feel like, is it's possible to have it all. You can have rad Brandon Campbell's with rad attitudes, but if he skates a P rail every day to get better because he loves skating, it doesn't make his attitude any less rad.
Totally, yeah.
He's still Brandon Campbell.
Right.
So I feel like some of my ideas were probably I was a little overzealous about some ideas, and I think they probably held back my skating ultimately.